Well, it seems that 2025 will be the year of Legends EA, and only Legends EA. Earlier this year, I speculated about the potential of a sudden drop of a remake of Gen 2 or Gen 5, if the Pokémon company wanted to continue in the vein of Let's Go and BDSP. But it seems that Game Freak and the Pokémon company might be learning their lessons from churning out too many games thanks to their own self-imposed deadlines, and that's a great thing for the series. So we have lots to unpack in today's video, and we've had some news that gives us a huge indication of where the Pokémon series is going in the next few years, and why 2024 has been a truly blank year for Pokémon. I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for 6,000 subscribers. The Galarian gang is growing beyond my hopes for 2024, and if you do enjoy the video today, please hit the subscribe button and leave a like. So, Riddler Coup tweeted this a couple of weeks ago, suggesting that 2025 will be solely focused on Ikaku, which is the code name for Legends EA. He claims that October and November were supposed to be hype months, but due to unforeseen circumstances, any new footage, teasers or trailers have been pushed to January, which is interestingly not too long before Pokémon Day on February the 27th. Those unforeseen circumstances are likely surrounding the Terra leak that recently happened, and also perhaps Nintendo's plans with their upcoming new console and the coordination of revealing gameplay based on that. But this gives us a clear proposed timeline that will most likely look something like this. In 2025, Legends EA. In 2026, Generation 10, and in 2027, that's when I now believe we'll get both a DLC for Gen 10 and perhaps also the Gen 2 or Gen 5 remake if they're not already incorporated into Gen 10. There was a recent rumour that leakers found data of a new Switch 2 version of Pokémon Home, in which the Gen 5 rival and Professor's assistant Bianca could be the new host on the software, replacing Grand Oak, perhaps temporarily or maybe allowing Pokémon Home users to choose their host. But speaking of the Switch 2 or Switch successor, Legends EA was announced for Switch systems, but that doesn't rule out that it might actually be a game for the Switch successor. Right now, it seems likely that the Switch successor will basically just be a powered up version of the Switch with AI rendering and 4K docked output, maybe called a Super Switch, Switch 2 or Switch Pro, and all indications seem to suggest full backwards compatibility with Switch games. But Pokémon might be holding off until the Switch successor gets announced, A, so that it can be marketed as a flagship game, which will help massively with console sales, and B, because when they do show us gameplay, they'll want to show us the best version of that gameplay. And of course the game will look much better on the Switch successor and with more refinement. So essentially, they might legally have to wait until the new console is officially revealed before showing us any gameplay whatsoever. The Switch successor announcement is confirmed to be happening before April 2025. Around January would be my best guess, so this all seems to line up quite logically. I'd suggest a late January reveal, potentially showing some ZA gameplay, and then further elaboration, details, and perhaps a release date on Pokémon Day 2025. And whilst it's sad that we won't be getting a new Pokémon game this year, and probably not until at least a few months into 2025, long term, this is fantastic news. Pokémon had been churning out games like nobody's business, and whilst I feel they did a fairly good job of keeping standards reasonably high during this time, taking on multiple projects at once, self-imposing deadlines, and splitting the developer teams internally has clearly had a bit of an impact on performance, execution, and ultimately the quality of their games. And this has been reflected in the reviews of recent games, dropping to the lowest standard Game Freak has ever seen with the Pokémon main series. They're still well reviewed, but not revered in the mid to high 80s and low 90s like many of the previous generations. Perhaps surprisingly, it hasn't had an impact on sales at all. In fact, if anything, they're around about as high as they've ever been. But Pokémon aren't stupid. They're fully aware of the issues in execution, the backlash in the community around how the last few games have looked and felt, and so taking this year off to allow for fine-tuning of these next two big projects, ZA in 2025 and Gen 10 in 2026, is almost certainly the right move. Pokémon is a family brand, and there's a huge audience of people in their late 20s and early 30s that the company cannot afford to alienate, and the best way to satiate the older audience who have followed from early gens is to make sure the product is executed to an extremely high standard, as it has been in years gone by. Right now, Pokémon being topical is being carried by events in already established games like Scarlet and Violet, Pokémon Go, and TCG Pocket. Microtransactions in the latter two of those are probably way up after some of the changes they've made in recent years, and I think this is probably a good thing for the main series video games to keep that interest and hype around it. But Pokémon will be turning 30 in 2026, and they're still getting used to being the world's biggest intellectual property after only 3 decades of existing. This meteoric rise to the top has seen it surpass Disney, Star Wars, and Marvel when you factor in all of the apps, merch, and hustles they've got going on. This is something we talk about a lot on this channel, and it's only right to hold them to high standards. And the Pokémon empire is getting bigger and bigger. In the realm of video games, you can very clearly see Pokémon trying to expand into different genres and subgenres, making really solid games to expand their overall market share. So the next couple of years are going to be huge for the company. The execution has to be much better than Scarlet and Violet, and Legends ZA will have to evolve from Legends Arceus, which was a fantastic starting point for the newly established subseries. But just how will they achieve that? What are the new and groundbreaking things that Pokémon games have to do to stay on top? Well, here's my take on that. Firstly, Pokémon need to utilize the power of AI, and they can apply this in a few ways. Firstly, for their visuals, which, to be fair, is going to be largely at the mercy of the capabilities of the Switch successor. As we mentioned, it's rumored to have AI upscaling technology and 4K output, ultimately meaning more graphical power. And as we know, Pokémon have made some beautiful, iconic games in the past. But taking that to the next level is really going to require Pokémon improving the quality and frequency of cinematic moments. No more describing the epic moment where a Dynamax Berserker wreaks havoc on the Galar region and just telling us with a simple text box. We need to see and feel the atmosphere of the world, and hopefully AI can assist with that process at the developer stage. And this doesn't have to be limited to cutscenes, but also having awesome looking things happen in-game in true RPG fashion. Whether it's in battles or just in the environment as you run around and explore a region, seeing 2 trainers randomly and independently battling each other as you explore the world, for example. And that's where the other AI enhanced point comes in, actually using it to enhance the experience in-game, making each player's experience more unique in more ways, whether it's improving and diversifying the behavior of AI-powered overworld characters and moving on from having them say a handful of repetitive predetermined pieces of NPC dialogue, whether the AI-powered trainers are able to learn your battle style and come up with solutions for the next time you battle them, whether AI can enable wild Pokémon to develop personalities and behave in a large variety of ways. Decades are usually defined by one major advancement in technology: the internet in the 2000s, the emergence of social media in the 2010s, and now in the 2020s, it's the decade of AI. And so Pokémon should be responsibly finding ways to use the power of AI to make their games truly groundbreaking and give us amazing new experiences. I have faith that they're working on this stuff right now, but time will tell. The next way I think Pokémon can take their games to the next level is by including voice acting. And I mean good, non-cringy voice acting. Now I'll admit, it would be pretty controversial and daring to go all out and include full-scale voice performances in Gen 10. I don't necessarily think it would be an awful idea if done right, but Pokémon haven't had main series voice acting in nearly 30 years of games. It's almost a tradition that they don't have it at this point. But I think there's a perfect opportunity to do it and test the waters of how the fan base reacts, either in Legends ZA or a future main series title. Mashing A and reading text was great on the Game Boy systems. It made sense on the DS and 3DS. On the Switch, however, I think it kind of feels awkward at times and takes away from further possible immersion. We have bigger screens, better hardware, more power, and now the option to play main series Pokémon on our living room TVs. For me, as long as the performances were good, I'd like to think it would breathe a new sense of life into the series. And guess what? If you want to play without voice acting, just give us an option to turn it off. Problem solved. Hopefully that's something they've been working on in their gap year. And the final point I wanted to make in today's video is something that's perhaps more looking backwards and learning from the past than learning from futuristic, cutting-edge technology, and that's something very simple: the element of mystery. Pokémon was always a very mysterious and enticing franchise. It entertained us while forcing us to ask questions. It kept us curious and encouraged us to go out of our way and explore. Whether it's the excerpts you discover in the Pokémon Mansion in Gen 1, fun, and following the breadcrumb trails of clues to learn the truth about Mewtwo and Giovanni, the mysterious guardian of the Ilex Forest, and the intrigue created by places like the Ruins of Alph, the Dragon's Den, and the story of the legendary dogs being resurrected by Ho-Oh in Gen 2, the secret Braille chambers of the Reggies in Gen 3, and so on. Granted, it's harder to generate mystery in the modern era of gaming. We live in an age where people just want everything right now, and the internet also makes it really easy to look stuff up and just progress. But at least throughout the main story, between the main game and the DLC, drop us hints. Keep an element of mystery, plant seeds for games we won't see for another 10 years, keep us hooked and theorizing. To be fair, Scarlet and Violet did a decent job with Area Zero, the paranormal magazines mentioned and such, but I personally found the story elements paid off in the DLC to be quite underwhelming. The execution of the Terapagos story I thought was kind of poor, and the Mochi Dance zombie thing in the epilogue, though I laughed at the time, with hindsight, I actually found it kind of underwhelming. I just thought it was too goofy, even for modern Pokemon. But there is hope, because there were elements of Scarlet and Violet that were really solid in this regard, and because in Legends Arceus, though I wasn't too sure about the whole Arc Phone thing, the actual Volo plot twist, summoning Giratina, the space rifts, and even things like hunting the legendaries or the final Arceus fight were actually very well executed plot points that kept us emotionally hooked and paid something off. But that's my take. What about yours? Let me know what you think Pokemon need to do to ensure the next few games in a new era of Nintendo consoles are A+. Until next time, love you gang.